is Michael Mitchell. I'm the park supervisor of the Lawrence Heritage State Park. And this presentation is on play spaces and public health. And we have two great presenters today, Brad Bouchard from Groundwork Lawrence and Sue Fink from the City of Lawrence. So we'll be here for the next hour and 15 minutes. There'll be plenty of time for the presentation and then take questions and answers at the end of the presentation. So without further ado, Brad.
Do you guys need me to use the mic?
Yes.
Yes, yes, okay. All right. Hi.
Hi.
I'm Brad, and this is the first time that Sue and I have ever done a presentation together, even though we've worked together for how many years we've done this? Eight years, a long time. We've done a lot of park projects together, and it's our very first time ever presenting together.
Hopefully not our last.
Hopefully not last. Unfortunately, we don't have Leslie Melendez here. She got an emergency that happened yesterday, and she kind of needed to take care of that. So the Lawrence side of this is going to be a bit abridged, but unfortunately. But what I'm going to talk about is the Playsteads, and from a landscape architect's perspective. And landscape architects know a little bit about a lot of different things, so it's not going to be a deep dive. I'm not an expert on Playsteads, but I'm going to take that and try to weave a narrative that ties it into playgrounds over the decades or centuries. And then Sue's going to talk a lot about Lawrence Park projects. So without further ado, but first a commercial. Most of you all know what Groundwork is, but we're part of a nationwide network of trusts. There's 21 of us. Groundwork Lawrence has been around for 19 years. We're one of the older trusts. How do we do this? We and I, through my work, largely focus on the physical environment. However, there's a lot more people behind me and in front of me and around me that do a lot of other programming through education and public health to really improve the lives of the people who live in Lawrence. We have 4 program areas. Those are community, so community engagement. We have a big Earth Day event 2 weekends from now? 2 weeks from today, you can come out to the Campagnone Common and work your tail off cleaning up the city. Open space and environment, so you got us here. Education and job training, so a lot of youth job training throughout the year, as well as in the summertime. It becomes particularly intense. And then fresh food and healthy living, so community gardens, community supported agriculture, farmers markets. All right, so parks. People really didn't think about parks for a long time. They're a recent development. This is a park in the late 1850s. This is Central Park. It's based on English landscape gardening, Humphrey Repton, Capability Brown type stuff. But this is Olmsted. So who's Olmsted designing parks for? They're wealthy. The rich people. The people who actually lived here before Central Park, does anybody know the story here? They were freed black slaves. So this is the first wave of what you would call green gentrification. People who do what Sue and I do, we're really concerned about gentrification because people say, if you improve parks, you're going to gentrify the neighborhoods. This right here is a prime example of green gentrification. It's park design for the wealthy. So what do? Well, you get your carriage and you take your horses and you trot around. This is parks. These are parks. This is recreation in the 1800s. Who's it for? You're promenading. You're putting your best, and you're promenading, and you're looking really good, right? But things change, right? So they see that people are using the sand lot, free play. People are being innovative. Kids are finding ways to, they want to play. Adults want to play. So here they are. It looks like they even have some sort of baseball game going on here. This is in Chicago. So this is in the 1890s, vacant lots, and people are like, oh my God, we need to organize this. So we need to get things organized. The gymnasium starts to go outside. You can see things coming together. But and these are all driven by reformers who are responding to industrialization. This is all about morality. This is all about, like, the downtrodden alien immigrants, downtrodden unhealthy factory workers into cohesive, healthy population of citizens working for the common good, ready to defend their country. That's what the reformers were all about. They defend your country through what? Through playgrounds, right? Playsteads. And who are they doing this for? So this is, I forget his name. It's Italian, Silvio. But Silvio is working. He just got a job in the air mill. He's in Lawrence, and he works 6 days a week, but he needs a park, right? Because he's making $5 a week, and then he needs to go hit the swings, right? And another individual, this is on Elm Street. He's doing pretty well too. He's making $5.15 a week. But he needs a playground, right? Because these are youth, these are kids who need to play. So these are some quotes around the playground movement of the time. This isn't in the late 1800s. This is more in the 1900s. But I won't read these, but you can see you got Theodore Roosevelt. You have a Playground Association of America startup. We don't have a Playground Association of America right now. But it's all about democracy. I love this third one down. Much crime and most juvenile delinquency are undoubtedly the results of perverted play and recreation. What does that mean? Our kids don't know how to play? Yeah, and then the last one is popular recreation and public morality. They're linking morality and recreation, and I find that to be pretty interesting. So how did they start? They dumped sand in a vacant lot and sand piles. They later called them sand gardens, right? And the kids would go out and they would play. The sand gardens become playgrounds. The same time in the 1900s, the gymnasiums that were organized first for boys, because you got to take care of the boys first, and then for girls, they had separate. They couldn't play together. Then they put it outside, and then all the genders were able to commingle. All the income classes were able to commingle, and you can sort of see this legacy of the gymnasium going outside in play equipment today. You still see it today. And it's pretty interesting when you link the two together. But play is less systematic and vigorous without supervision. So one of the big pieces of the Playstead movement was supervision, playground supervisors. So one of the projects Sue and I are working on right now is the South Common. And there's an outbuilding in the South Common right in the middle, and that's where the playground supervisor used to be, right out there. That station was built for park rangers to go out and organize play, to provide recreational activity, because it was more moral if you were organized versus less organized, I suppose. Sorry, I'm being a little glib. But you can start to see, Central Park, they catch on. In the 1930s, they're like, oh my God, we need a playground. But Olmsted probably would have been rolling in his grave at the time if he knew that somebody was putting baseball diamonds in the Central Park or playgrounds in Central Park. This was Central Park. You cannot put a playground or a baseball diamond in the most important park in the city. So, but look at the slides. You start to see some pretty cool design happening. And then the jungle gym down here, the lower right, you start to see these threads, these elements, these features that are still present today. I mean, when I looked at the slides too, I was like, oh my God, that's Bourgoin to a T. Right, Vilma? Yeah. Another slide, here's a supervisor, overseeing the kids. The equipment, the swing set that's behind the slide over here, just like what we have at Howard Playstead today. We start to get into the 60s, things get a little bit more streamlined. We're talking about going to space, so space themes come to play. Here's that circular slide. This is in the 70s. You know, they stole this design from Central Park that was developed 35 years earlier. And then look at all these killer slides and that platform that's like 20 feet tall, and you got sand below you. So this is when people are thinking, these aren't safe. Unsafe at any speed, right? It's the 70s, okay? But it's pretty innovative. You know, I didn't include this picture, but the steps for the ladder to get up to that platform, it's all about, there are these letters imprinted in, and it says fun, 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 as you go up the steps, you know. So imagine a kid, you're just thinking fun, fun, fun. This is so much fun. But if you fall off of that, it's not fun. But look at the surface, it's sand, it's still sand, right? It's still sand. So you know, we're more regulation is happening, and so playground design changes. And this is what you pretty much end up with in the 80s and 90s. Just a lot of very safe wood chips, engineered wood fiber wood chips, you know, because it's a fall hazard. Lots of these are dime a dozen type playgrounds that you see a lot.
All around Lawrence.
All around Lawrence, and they were all put in the 80s and 90s, and Sue and I have been working to improve them. Even this one, you see, this is more modern, but you still see that it's kind of boring. No loud colors. There's still sand. You know, sand is still fun. Sand is fun to play with, but as a designer, you're thinking cats like to use it as a litter box, and then also glass and litter and needles, that type of thing. So there was a backlash at this time. People are like, look, kids need to be getting crazy out there. They need time to really express themselves. They can be creative. This is free time. They can be amoral. So I believe this is a sign for a playground in North Wales called The Land. And there's a great documentary about it. You know, it's a voluntary community project. We always need wood, nails, tools, and volunteers, etc. So volunteers, so still the supervised play idea. And this is what they got on the inside. So, you know, a bunch of found material, old furniture, storage containers, sewage pipes. There's one picture with a kid. He's got a piece of wood over his head, and he's throwing it into a fire. So this is The Land. You know, these kids are going. They got rolls of plastic. They're making forts. You know, there's lots of sharp objects here. So there is a backlash. People are like, look, it's important for kids to be a little bit fun here. And the design response is to be a little bit more muted. Let's use wood. It's a natural material. Natural is good. Let's incorporate sand. I believe this is also at Central Park. But the wood they use is pressure treated, and it's got arsenic all in it. So safety again. That's a problem for youth. In Massachusetts, by the way, the Massachusetts Public Health Department, they require 2 soil tests for playground areas, one's for lead, one's for arsenic. The arsenic is dated to pressure-treated wood. And then back to free play. And this is sort of the tail end of the presentation. I'm trying to highlight some really innovative play spaces that are in the Boston region, and this is in the Cambridge Common. And so, you know, when the designer was looking, this is all custom. When the designer's thinking about this, was he thinking, or she was thinking, that the kids would be on top of it? You know, is that I can guarantee that safety surface is not rated for that fall hazard. Absolutely not. Custom wood design. So this is all black locust or locust, which is very rot resistant. You can see in the background a hill that has that safety surface in it, the rubberized safety surface. Again, we have sand, so sand is prominent as a play surface. Charles River Esplanade in Boston. This is a more off-the-shelf type design, but Berliner is the company out of Germany. They're doing a lot of great stuff. The city has bought done two playgrounds with their equipment, but this is like the monster slide, and the great climbing structure. But it looks similar to what you saw in the Central Park picture in 1835 with the climbing structure in the bottom, but this is just nets. So, you know, I have 3 daughters and they would love playing at this playground. And then still more custom free play. So this is Chucky Harris in Somerville, and this is all, very little of it is off the shelf. But you have a big slide there, and you have different changes in elevation, and that big horseshoe structure that you see, the yellow horseshoe structure that actually is in the background of this picture, that actually you can mount a screen on it and play videos and movies. This is what it looks like, and then there's a spray park built into it. As you can see, it gets mobbed, and there's the slide. Okay, the last 2 slides that I have. You know, have you heard of on NPR the recent discussions about free-range kids, and Utah actually just passed a law saying that you can't. Parents are able to decide how far their kids should be able to range as a child, so that they could let them ride their bike to the park. Previously, what was happening is if their kids rode the bike to the park, some mother called the cops and said, "There's a child here alone, and they're playing in the park, and no parent is with them." And so this diagram is really interesting because this is actually from England. But you can see over 4 generations, the right to roam has completely declined in our broader society. I don't know how this is in Lawrence, so it would be really interesting to see how far Lawrence youth actually do roam in the summertime. You know, do they follow what you see in the English countryside? But I would say that this is very representative of our society, of our broader society. Probably not so much of Lawrence, because I think kids in Lawrence roam a lot more. But that's speculation on my part. So the great-grandfather, 1919, he roamed 6 miles. And in just 4 generations, it's 300 yards is how far the great-grandson roams, which is just pretty remarkable. So think about how much trouble you could get into 6 miles versus 300 yards. And what does that impact? How does that impact you? So if you don't have free play, if you're just not able to go out to the land and play and build forts, you know, over the past half century in the United States, I'll just read this. In the United States and other developed nations, recent research suggests that over the same period, anxiety, depression, suicide, feelings of helplessness, and narcissism have increased in children, adolescents, and young adults. And the lack of free play can lead to reduced sense of personal control, increased narcissism, and a tendency toward materialism. So when you hear the phrase kids these days, they're totally programmed. And this isn't necessarily Lawrence context, but throughout our society, we are just programming our kids and carting them from place, to activity. And it's all organized, and it's all moral, and it's all right, and it's all to like get into the best college possible because it starts at age 10.
So I don't know about you, Brad, but I don't ever remember my parents taking me to the park. My mother shoved me out the door and off I went by myself. And look, here I am still today, with not too much.
My mom said, here's $20, ride your bike, and get me a carton of Salem Ultralight 100, and a gallon of milk.
Perfect. So, as we've learned today, one of the determinants of health is the environment. Lawrence is making an impact on that and the work that Brad and I do on a daily basis. So why do we do it? Lawrence, as we all know, is about 7 square miles, densely populated with many multiple unit buildings, with not much green space for kids to play. Parks have become people's yards. You need green space during the summer to escape from the brutal heat that emanates off the hardscape that surrounds us. We clean up derelict and contaminated sites. Two of the more recent parks that I've worked on, the Dr. Nina Scarito Park and Manchester Street Park, were both built on formerly contaminated sites. So we've put beautiful parks on sites that have had a detrimental impact on the air quality of your house. You know, kids bring dirt everywhere. They go out to a contaminated site, they get the dirt all over them, they bring it into your house becomes unhealthy. And what about economic development? That seems like a strange connection between a park and economic development. But let's take, for example, a business that wants to move to our community. One of the things that they look for, besides where are their people going to live that work for them, where are they going to play? So having good parks is a way to build economic development in a community. How do we pay for it? That's a scary thought. So we have state grants. There's Park, which is parkland acquisition and renovations for communities. There's the Land and Water Conservation Fund, Gateway Cities. There are federal grants. Community Development Block Grant is a perfect example of federal funds that we use in the city to complement state funds to build parks. There are local funds, capital improvement funds, and bond funding. Since 2010, the city has invested over $7.2 million in park construction and renovation, and there's another $2 million underway. And this doesn't even include the funds that have gone to Groundwork Lawrence from the state to build Ferrous Park and Spicket River Greenway. So that's about another $5.4 million of funds. And there are renovations through DPW that are not included in this. So Dr. Nina Scarito Park was the very first park project that I ever worked on in partnership with Groundwork Lawrence and Leslie Melendez specifically. In the 1850s, this site had a small mill on it, and there were several raceways running through the property. In the 40s, it was redeveloped into a commercial laundry. And in the late 80s, the buildings were demolished and the site was left vacant. Back in 2001, a neighborhood summit determined that a neighborhood park was needed here. So in 2006, remediation of the site was completed, a beautiful park was constructed with funds from a multitude of sources. And to be perfectly honest with you, I had no idea what I was doing when I was given this project. It's like, hey, I need somebody to manage this project. I'm like, well, I suppose I could manage something. You know, I have a degree, I can manage people. But went full force, and I've learned so much since then, and I think it came out pretty good. So now on this former brownfield site, we've got community gardens. We all need fresh fruits and vegetables. Perfect place is a community garden. There's a playground, a basketball court, a beautiful walking path. So the city is trying to be deliberate in designing these parks to engage the entire family when you come to a park. The kids are going to want to play at the basketball court if they're a little bit older. The younger ones are going to play on the playgrounds. They're going to learn social skills by interacting with other children. They are going to learn spatial skills. How do I get from this spot to the next spot? What do the adults do? They can take a nice stroll around the park on that perimeter. Social health. They're going to meet neighbors. They're going to make connections. They're going to improve their social skills and really make for a better life for themselves. Now, this is a really scary picture. Manchester Street Park, again, a derelict site, former site of an incinerator, detrimental to our air quality, detrimental to the soil, right near Stevens Ponds, contaminating the water. Remediation was done. We have a beautiful playground there. There's community gardens, and I somehow volunteered to help build those community gardens Brad, you weren't at Groundwork at that point. But it must have been the hottest day ever in the city of Lawrence. We were out there, and I just remember how hot it was, and I couldn't wait to be finished with that project. But you know what? It was all for a good cause. So here's some kids climbing on a structure that looks very similar to some of the photos that Brad showed you in his presentation. Equipment like this gives kids a chance to, hone their skills, learn about balance, again, learn spatial. Those kids might not even be in the same family. They're learning to interact with each other, getting dexterity. All right, maybe the traditional types of activities aren't for you. You're not a basketball player. You're not a softball or baseball player. You're a skateboarder. Well, we have a park for you too. Misserville Park gives you the opportunity to ride your skateboard and do some crazy tricks that I couldn't possibly imagine. I can just imagine myself if I'm on that skateboard at that front, I'd be on the ground for sure. So they're learning balance, they're learning dexterity, they're learning to be a little daring, go out of the box, build confidence, and your social skills. Spicket River Greenway, I'm sure you're all familiar with that white line that you see when you're walking around the city. There's this white line going down the sidewalks, crossing over the street, and you're thinking, what is that? Well, that's the Spicket River Greenway. Way back in 1998, the Spicket River Greenway was identified in the Groundwork Lawns feasibility study. And as many of you know, putting a project together like this takes a lot of planning, lots of partnerships. You have to get easements from property owners, you have to get funding, you have to get buy-in from the community, you have to get buy-in from the politicians. So it was talked about, and it took about 15 years to come to fruition. So it takes a long time for a project like this to be put together. Plus, there are all these little pocket parks that were in the discussion that while the Greenway was being built, all these pocket parks were being built as well. So this is really hard to see, but there's connections from Ferrous Park, right down the street, winds through the city and ends up over in Manchester Street Park by the Methuen Rail Trail, soon to be the Lawrence Rail Trail. So this is a pretty unsightly site. This is a view of the DPW Yard. Would any of you want to walk by this, ride your bike by this, take your kids in a carriage by this? I don't think so. But how about now? That's the same site. As part of the Spicket River Greenway, this site became a much more pleasant place to walk, bike, jog, whatever by. Oops, did I go too far? Campagnone Common, one of my favorite projects. So, Mayor's Health Task Force, again, Mayor's Health Task Force is just in every presentation, right, Homer? It's just everywhere. I'm a proud participant in the Mayor's Health Task Force. So, signs were placed around Campagnone Common because we always saw people walking around the common. It's a pretty easy walk. There's sidewalks. You're in a pretty safe area. There's always lots of eyes on it. So, it seemed like a nice place to walk, but who knew how far you were walking? Maybe if I knew how far I was walking, I might be more inclined to go out there. So the Mayor's Health Task Force got some funding, and they placed signs around the common. So once around the common is 3/4 of a mile. That seems pretty reasonable. I could do 3/4 of a mile. But what if I did twice? That's 1.5 miles. I have plenty of time to walk 1.5 miles and have lunch during my lunch hour. It's helping me get healthier. And let me tell you, there are lots of people out there doing the very same thing. I see them in the morning when I go to work. I see them at lunchtime. I see them at night when I'm leaving work. So, Campagnone Common has these beautiful pathways that go from corner to corner. Just lovely. I just love standing there and looking down this path. Before we did some renovations to them, they were crumbled pavements, they would pool water. If it was winter, that water was turned into ice, and if you didn't watch it, you were on the ground. this way, we've got these beautiful pathways. We have a fabulous playground. We've got all sorts of opportunities for play here. Some kids don't like traditional play equipment. We've got some climbing opportunities. We've got my favorite rocks, no, my very controversial rocks. So kids jump from rock to rock. What are they doing? They're learning balance. They're learning dexterity. They're learning distance. They're building their confidence. They're saying, I wonder if I can do that. Mental health is part of, public health. You need to have a healthy mind as well as a healthy body. This is helping kids develop that healthy mind. We've got these multicolored rectangles on the left. Kids learn to jump from color to color. They're learning colors. There's a hopscotch, one of my favorite games when I was growing up. There's also climbing opportunities, all sorts of ways for getting your kids to move in not the traditional ways. Did you know that there's a park at the end of Island Street? It's where the North Canal, the Spicket, and the Merrimack all come together. There's even a waterfall there. We all know about the Great Stone Dam and the waterfall there, but did you know that there's another little waterfall right there at the end of Island Street? Parks are used for educational purposes. Teaching kids about the environment gets them to think, maybe that's the kind of job I want to do when I get out of college. They're learning about the ecosystem. And look at these beautiful photos of bald eagle and a hawk taken in Lawrence. I mean, when you think about a city, do you think of bald eagles? Well, here we have them right in our own very city. So here's sort of an overview of the Ferrous site. And if you look at that sort of egg-shaped green space on the right-hand side of the diagram, there's a little zigzag path there. You really can't tell, but that's actually a hill. It's a mound of sand castings. Thank you, Brad. And that little zigzag path takes you up. So it's a different way of moving, and you get a nice view of the river from that vantage point. Here's a cross section, so those folks on the hill are at the top of that. They've walked up that little zigzag path. So, you're climbing, your heart's racing a little bit, so all good, all getting you healthier. John P. Kane Park. This was the site of the former Kane School Gymnasium. Knocked down in the 80s, became a dumping site for DPW. Not very good to look at. Who wants to go and look out their window at a big pile of dirt, sand, all sorts of debris? Nobody. Neighbors didn't want that. They wanted a park. So we built them a park. It was a community build effort. We had a meeting at the South Lawrence East School, got lots of input from the community of what they wanted. So we've got a soccer field. Kids love to play soccer. There's another walking path right around the perimeter. Kids are playing soccer, they're at practice. What are mom and dad gonna do? We're gonna go for a walk. The whole family's exercising, socializing all at the same time. Again, important for your mental health, your social skills, and your physical health. It's play equipment. We tried to put the play equipment at each park a little bit different. Try to get kids to do things in a not so traditional way all the time. So we put in a little climbing wall, a little rock wall. Kids have to learn how to, where do they put their hands, where do they put their feet so they can climb up, not fall down. Balancing, climbing up those ladders, jumping from these little round discs on poles, how to judge distance. And then for those who really like to exercise, let's get outside. Let's not go to the gymnasium. Let's not pay $10 a month to go to Planet Fitness. let's go to John P. Kane Park. You can exercise outside. There's all sorts of adult exercise equipment there. No need to go to the gym. And this sort of looks like a slide that Brad mentioned. Here is one of our Berliner pieces of equipment at Bourgoin Square Park. Just a little plug, we're having a ribbon cutting on this coming Wednesday at noon. You're all invited to come on down. So this is really an adventuresome piece of equipment. This would put me right out of my comfort zone because I'm a little klutzy, I admit it. I would be falling right through those little spaces. I'm not very good at judging distance, so maybe I should go over and then try this out. Maybe it'll do something for me. And that slide, that is a slide. You like heights? That slide is for you. It's a tube, then you spin around. So you've got all sorts of opportunities for learning, skills, from climbing, jumping, distance.
So where is that?
That's Bourgoin Square Park. That's West Street.
Oh, West.
Mm-hmm. So the Gagnon Park, which is right across the street from the Bruce School, is another community design project. We've got this cute little tower design here. This is our other Berliner project. And the folks that helped pick out the display equipment felt that that sort of tied into the water tower up on Tower Hill. And the design of the safety surface, those multicolored circles, we actually held a design contest at the Bruce School one day after they finished their MCAS test. They got to draw a design of what they thought the safety surface on this playground could look like. And Ashley, whose name shall remain silent because we don't want to publicize a youth, drew up this design and it caught our eye right away. So it's not only pretty, but again, it's somewhere that kids can learn how to jump from a circle to a circle to a circle. They can learn colors. There's all sorts of ways that play enhances your health. O'Connell South Common is a project that Brad and I are working on right now. So this is some historical photos of what the path system looked like back from 1906 through 1957 up to 1973. This is a rendering of the park design for phase one with a little bit of eye to the future. The playground expansion and the splash pad is going to be in a future phase. But what we did was we redesigned the pathways to make them ADA compliant because they were not in any way, shape, or form good for people in wheelchairs. And they're much more curvy. Campagnone Common is a very linear pathway system. South Common is a very curvy. It sort of invites you, come on in. Let's take a stroll. Let's go see where this path leads us. It's all about getting people walking, moving, running, biking. And hey, wait a minute, that's exercise, isn't it? And again, we have the same signs around South Common, but there weren't as many people walking around South Common as there were around Campagnone Common because the sidewalks were in pretty rough shape. Luckily, we were able to repair that derelict sidewalk on Market Street, and I've seen an increase in the number of people walking around the park. Now this looks like a lot of fun, doesn't it? This is our Howard Playstead. This is the equipment that we have on order. And on the right-hand side is our very first piece of equipment for infants. We've never had infant equipment in any of the parks. So the piece of equipment on the right is for infants from 6 months to 23 months. Then we move over to the left. That's another piece of equipment for ages 2 to 5. So again, there's all sorts of age-appropriate, height-appropriate climbing opportunities, opportunities to socialize with other kids. And I think this is going to be a lot of fun in this park. And then how about this? This is for the older kids. This is for ages 5 to 12. There is all sorts of neat opportunities to get kids moving here. And no, we won't have sand underneath. We will have board in place safety surface. Because I don't know about you, I've fallen on sand, it's hard. Then we have the rail trail, which, where are we going? Oh, there we go. There's our rail trail. So right now the rail trail is in the planning stages. It's an abandoned rail bed that once transported people and goods. A 1.4 mile stretch of land that goes from our rail trail is going to go from the Methuen border up at Manchester Street Park. It's going to cross down this rail trail and end at the canals. Again, it's a way to clean up potentially contaminated lands because you've had railways roaming over it, illegal dumping, illegal activity going on. And it's a total of 14 acres of previously undeveloped land that we're going to put back into use. And again, we're going to get people moving. So again, why? Why do we do this? Why do Brad and I get up every day and do this kind of work? Because play allows children to use their creativity while developing their imagination, dexterity, physical, cognitive, and emotional strengths. City of Lawrence has adopted a health in all policies way of thinking. Every time we're working on a policy, we're saying, how does this impact the health of our residents, either physically, emotionally, environmentally? It's something that the city has committed to do. And we want to get people moving from 6 months to the elderly because it's all about health.
Sure. You want to go?
Sure. I'll go first and then Brett can jump in. I get asked a similar question every time I go before City Council when we get a new park grant. How are we going to pay for the maintenance? I said, well, first of all, we can't pay for the maintenance using the state or federal grants because that's considered ordinary maintenance. It's a city responsibility. The Mass Health Task Force, once again, is working under a grant from the Mass Department of Public Health, Mass in Motion, and one of the tasks we're working on is creating an adopt a park policy and system. It's been a lot of back and forth with DPW. It's not quite there yet. We're still tweaking some of the things, but we're trying to get businesses, organizations, and the community, churches, etc., to take ownership of parks in their neighborhood because it takes a village to keep a city going. We all know that the city resources are dwindling. We have a fairly low tax base, so the tax base isn't there to support additional staff in DPW. So we're trying to creatively think of ways that we can still have these beautiful amenities and maintain them, but not put an extra burden on the taxpayers.
So the primary input in maintenance of parks in Lawrence is mowing the fields, mowing green lawns. In Olmsted's day, they got goats and sheep to take care of it. Now we have the DPW on riding lawnmowers. But I'll give a big shout out to Carlos Jaquez, the DPW director, because for $10,000 a year, he has set up an online mapping system where he can call up all the work orders that are in place. If you call the DPW and say, for example, a tree fell down in the last storm, it's in my backyard, the Porphy logs it, that point becomes, is located on a map, and then Carlos can, with all the other calls that came in, and then Carlos can immediately pull that up for a city councilor who might call him and say, hey, what's going on with the storm damage? Why are you this and this and this? He can show you, we've responded to 56 storm-related calls, and we have 136 pending. And how many trees are we getting, will people call from Greenfield Street or from Clifton Street, and they say, we have street trees that are heaving our sidewalks and they're a major issue. That point gets logged, and then he can take that to council and he can show them, we need $500,000 to maintain our urban forest canopy, our urban tree canopy, because these are all the calls that we have, this is how we've been able to attack him, and this is how what the backlog is, and this is how much money we need. So Carlos has done an amazing job of taking DPW. I love working with John Isenzi, but Carlos has revolutionized it. He's taken us from the DPW of the 70s to the DPW of the 21st century. The last point that I would make is parks like Oxford, parks like Ferrous, and Ferrous doesn't have a name yet, so I'm not trying to give it a name. Sorry, I'm not. That's just what we call it. Parks like TBD, the rail trail. Getting people to understand that that there's this thing called an urban wild, where the lawn only needs to be mowed twice a year. It grows up, it's beautiful, it's spring flowers, late summer flowers, and then it's mowed, preferably in the spring, and it's just mulched. You do what's like an ecological term called arresting succession to stop the forest from coming in. And you could even bring in goats to manage the vegetation as well. So those are the two big responses that I have. But things like playgrounds, they just need to be replaced every 20 years. I mean, at 10, 15 years, kids play really hard on the playgrounds here in the city. And once one bolt comes loose, they just hit it. They just want it to come even, you know.
You were all kids once.
You
You
know,
were
they
doing
just
something
want to
like
get
that.
that slide off. Yeah, I mean, like the playground at the North Common. It was like, that was the first project that I worked on here, and it really has changed the character of the space. And they did just renovate their playground on South Lawrence. The boathouse services over. I thought it was like 30,000 kids, 100,000 every year. You talk to Jed, it's a lot of kids.
Jed's very passionate
Jed's
about
very
it.
passionate.
Shouldn't be going further.
But even over there, like I was talking to a coworker. She's like, "What about the beach? Is there a beach? Can we get a beach in Lawrence to swim?"
We have a beach.
And I said, "Lo and behold, Riverfront State Park. They had a plan for a beach, so maybe we'll get that beach someday."
Engagement, because that's important. It doesn't matter how many trash cans we put out, if the community itself is not having, doesn't have the pride or understanding that, you have to really think of the trash can.
I will just say that when I go out to see parks on Monday morning, and I see a lot in the summertime, and I see a lot of trash in the parks, I'm actually kind of happy, because it means that people are actually using them, that they're being used and people are engaging them in the right way. And what made me feel like that was a justifiable perspective was Hudson River Park in New York City. Everybody ascends on this linear park along that waterway, and at 3 a.m., this New York City Parks Department, they just go from one end to the next, just cleaning up way more trash than you'll have trash barrels for. It means that the parks are being used, but people could carry it out, and they could also just make sure that it gets into the barrel. The way it's been described to me by others is it's cultural norms. So when you come from the DR or Puerto Rico, solid waste disposal is managed in a very different way. It's not centralized. So littering is quite common. And if you've ever traveled in Mexico, you see litter all over the place as well. And so this is just what people say to me, that the cultural, Lawrence has, I think 39% of Lawrence is foreign born. So the theory is, that others have said, is that you just don't understand that if you have your trash and you just put it in your pocket, instead of just throwing it out. But the other side of this, of what people say, is that, but if once you get inside somebody's house and their yard, it is completely immaculate. Take your shoes off. It's very, very, very tidy. So cultural norms.
There was one aspect, sorry, George Richardson, yes. Part of this question was people who want to put trash in the trash barrel, but it's full to overflowing.
Right.
to get people to put trash in the barrel.
So when you notice something like that,
Back to staff.
you know, call DPW, tell them, you know, I noticed that the, but I think a matter of, you know, letting DPW know that you've noticed that, you know, the trash can at Kennedy Playstead hasn't been emptied in 3 weeks. I think that gets to the discussion that Brad had earlier about they've got this tracking system, and data is what politicians need to see to increase a budget. They don't want to hear anecdotal stories. They want to know that, you know, in the past 6 months, DPW has had 150 calls for overflowing trash cans, so maybe they don't have enough staff. So it's a matter of the community voicing this to DPW, who can then in turn voice it to City Council and perhaps get a budget increase that would allow for additional staffing.
Before the tracking system was put in place, nobody knew how many trash receptacles were located in parks. So now when Carlos is going in front of DPW or City Council, he can say, every week we empty 1,000 trash barrels in parks and in public spaces. No, but it's into the hundreds for sure. Yeah.
DPW does have that number, yes.
Yeah, it's not all of them, but it's for those in parks, yes. Yeah. Yep.
You're welcome.
Thanks.
All right, thank you.